So today I'm doing the second part of a twice turn bowl. So I roughed this bowl out about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, and I left the wall thickness 10% of the overall diameter of the bowl, and now I'm putting it back on the lathe. I start by putting the bowl in between the tailstock and the chuck. It gives me some space from the spindle of the lathe. And I start off by putting a tenon on the bowl. And once I've got the tenon on the bowl, I mount it in the chuck. And you can see, and I do this every time, I use the tailstock to add some pressure while I'm tightening down the chuck to make sure that the bowl is seated well. And what I'm doing here is putting a recess on the inside of the bowl to fit my larger jaws so that I can turn the bowl back around and finish the outside first. I'm doing the same thing, using my tailstock to add pressure so that the chuck seats well in the recess on the interior of the bowl. And then I attach it to the lathe. And the reason I do this is so that I can use a push cut all the way around the bottom. There's a lot of different ways to make a bowl. Sometimes I use a swept-back gouge or an Irish grind to get an original shape. But when I'm finishing the bowl, I like to use a 40-40 gouge. That's a 40-degree bevel, and the wings are also grounded at 40 degrees back. I picked that up from Stuart Batty and Ashley Harwood. And what I find is with a gentle touch, using a push cut with the 40-40 gouge, I get a nice finishing cut with no tear out, which means my sanding is greatly reduced. I normally get to start with 180 grit sandpaper, and I'm assuming that most of you turners out there are like me. You would much rather be cutting than you would sanding. Up to this point, I've been using a 5/8 inch bowl gouge that I've picked up from Ashley Harwood. You can see where I purchased those with the link below. I'm using a negative rake scraper to smooth out some of the high spots. And then before I turn it back around, I'm just smoothing out the tenon, and I'll use a skew chisel to take a very small cut off the tenon just to make sure it's going to be running true when I turn it back around. Now that the outside of the bowl is done, I'm going to start off by leveling out the rim. When a bowl dries, it not only warps, but the ends of the bowl where the end grain are going to rise up as the bowl is drying, and so you've got to flatten that back out. Again, I'm using a push cut, this time with a 1/2 inch 40-40 bowl gouge that I picked up from Ashley Harwood. I really like her system. The gouges are good. The interchangeable handles are fantastic. Can't recommend them enough. You can see I'm working my way slowly down, checking the thickness of the bowl, making sure I get an even thickness. You can use calipers to do this. I prefer to use my hands when I can. And here I'm removing some of the waste in the middle so that I can get a push cut further down the bowl without my wing of the gouge catching into the material. And now we're getting some finishing cuts with the 1/2" bowl gouge. And the smaller gouge takes a smaller cut, shallower cut, and a shallower cut, if you're cutting slowly with your lathe turning fast but safe, it gives you an excellent result. You can see from this picture there's no torn grain I'm going to have to deal with. And now I'm using an Irish ground gouge just to flatten out the bottom before I switch to my bottom bowl gouge or a bottom feeder. And I'll slowly keep working with this gouge until I get a nice uniform curve on the inside of the bowl that starts at the top and works all the way down at the bottom. I'm trying to avoid any flat spots at the bottom. And now comes every turner's favorite part, sanding. The plus side of using a push cut with a 40/40 gouge is I'm able to start sanding at 180 grit. And so a little bit of power sanding, a little bit of hand sanding where the power sander can't get. Same thing on the inside, starting with 180 grit and finishing with 220, or finishing with 320 rather. Clean the bowl off with some compressed air, and now I'm going to use a product for the first time. This is Axe Abrasive Sanding Paste. I reached out to the people at Axe, and they sent me a sample of their product to use and see if I like it, and display it in my videos. And I've got to be honest with you, I was extremely pleased with the results from this sanding paste. It gave an incredibly smooth finish. And after the sanding paste, I finished up with the wax, carnauba wax, also provided by Axe. And the finished product was just fantastic. It had an incredibly pleasant luster to the wood that has remained for, every day since I've turned the bowl. And it feels incredibly smooth. I can't wait to keep using this product, use it more. I've used several other things. I'll talk about that in a later video. But so far, I am incredibly pleased with the Axe products. Can't recommend them enough. And there's a link that you can use below the video as well. You can see that nice shine the carnauba wax gives. So now it's time to take the tenon off, and I like to use the tenon as a part of the bowl. I've got a vacuum chuck here, so I'll center the bowl on the vacuum chuck. And when I start cutting, I'll use the tailstock just for some extra support. I'm not removing the tenon, I'm just cutting it in a way that looks like it was originally a part of the bowl. So again, that's the 1/2" bowl gouge I'm using, and finishing up with a negative rate scraper. And now I'm taking out some material at the very bottom of the bowl so that the bowl sits on a small lip on a table, so it'll sit flat. Same thing as before. Start sanding with 180, 220, finish with 320, and then use the Axe Abrasive Paste and carnauba wax. There's my maker's mark. And in a minute, I'll pull the bowl off the vacuum chuck, and you'll see what looks like a little moisture on the inside of the bowl. That is wax that the vacuum chuck has pulled. And you can see it glistening in the light just a little bit. You can smooth that out. And I'll take it outside for some better pictures. Thanks for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, comment, ring the bell. I'm looking forward to making more videos for you in the future.